Music stayed loud, drinks kept flowing without pause, and James Sterling watched as he always did, from the shadows. Then, he saw her. It wasn't her clothes. It wasn't her face. It was the way she kept her shoulders tense even when no one was looking, like someone who had learned that relaxing was dangerous. James had seen that posture before, in men questioned for hours, in women who survived by learning to make themselves small. When Joey Thornton walked through the door, the girl went pale. She didn't scream. She didn't ask for help. She only lowered her gaze for 1 second too long. James understood the signal, and he knew someone was doing something unforgivable inside his territory. She held her shoulders wrong. James Sterling had been watching people lie for 37 years, 20 of them from behind the mahogany desk of his office, 15 before that, on the streets of South Philadelphia, where he'd learned that survival meant reading the truth beneath the performance. He knew the difference between someone who'd had a hard week and someone who'd stopped expecting mercy. The girl standing in the service entrance of his club was the latter. It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late August. Vesper didn't open until 9, which meant the cavernous main floor was empty, except for the cleaning crew and Mike counting liquor inventory at the bar. Afternoon light came through the industrial windows in geometric patterns, illuminating dust motes and the gleam of black marble floors that cost more per square foot than most people made in a month. James had been reviewing the previous night's receipts in his usual booth, the one in the back corner with sightlines to all 3 entrances and the service corridor that led to his office. Old habits, the kind that kept you alive in his line of work. He noticed her the moment the door opened. She stepped inside, but stayed close to the threshold, 1 foot still in the alley. Not tentative, calculated, like she was mapping her exit before committing to entry. She kept her weight forward on the balls of her feet. Her right hand gripped the strap of a canvas messenger bag that looked like it had been through a war, and her left hung at her side, fingers curled slightly inward. But it was the shoulders that caught his attention. They were drawn forward in a way that had nothing to do with posture and everything to do with pain. Old pain. The kind that made you protective of your ribs even after the bruises had faded. James had seen it before, on men who'd taken beatings, on women who'd learned to make themselves smaller, on anyone who'd been hurt badly enough that their body remembered even when their mind tried to forget. She was young, 18, maybe 19. It was hard to tell. Her face had that particular kind of exhaustion that aged people prematurely. Not lined, but worn. Dark circles under darker eyes. Cheekbones too prominent. Brown hair pulled back in a ponytail so tight it had to hurt, though he suspected that was the point. Control what you could control. She wore jeans that had been washed until the denim had gone nearly gray, worn through at the knees. A long-sleeved flannel shirt despite the heat. Navy blue. Buttoned to the wrists, buttoned to the collar, boots that had seen better years, the messenger bag across her body like armor. Everything about her said, "Don't look at me." Everything about her made James look closer. Mike noticed her next. He glanced up from his clipboard, irritation flickering across his face before he smoothed it away. Mike was good at his job, 15 years managing Vesper's day operations, but he had the particular blindness of someone who'd never had to be afraid. "Help you?" Mike called out. The girl flinched. It was subtle. Most people would have missed it. But James had spent 2 decades reading micro-expressions in negotiation rooms and interrogation basements, and he saw the way her whole body tensed, the way her left hand became a fist, the way her eyes went flat and distant for half a second before she forced herself back into the moment. Fear, response, immediate and visceral. "I'm looking for work," she said. Her voice was quiet but surprisingly steady, rehearsed. Mike set down his clipboard. "What kind of work?" "Cleaning, dishes, whatever you need." "You got experience?" "Yes." "Where at?" A pause, barely a heartbeat, but James caught it. "A restaurant downtown." "Which restaurant?" Another pause. Longer this time. "It closed." Mike sighed. He wasn't unkind, just busy. "Look, we're not really hiring right now. Maybe try." "I can start today." She said it quickly, almost desperately, then seemed to catch herself. Her jaw tightened. When she spoke again, her voice was more controlled. I have experience. I'm reliable. I can work any hours. Any hours, Mike repeated, something shifting in his tone, not suspicion exactly, but awareness. Yes, sir. The sir was automatic, submissive, the kind of deference that came from somewhere darker than simple politeness. James closed the ledger in front of him. The sound made the girl's eyes dart toward his booth for the first time, though she didn't quite look at him. Her gaze landed somewhere near his left shoulder, then skittered away. He stood. The movement was deliberate, slow enough not to startle, fluid enough to convey control. He was a tall man, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of presence that came from authority rather than aggression. At 54, he kept himself in shape the way men in his position had to, not for vanity, but for survival. His hair was dark with gray at the swirl. Temples, his face weathered in a way that spoke to Mediterranean ancestry and too many nights without sleep. He wore what he always wore during the day, dark slacks, a pressed white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, no tie. He walked toward them. The girl noticed when he was still 20 feet away. Her whole body went rigid. Not the flinch from before. This was different. This was the stillness of prey that had just realized the predator had noticed them. Her left hand moved slightly toward her bag, then stopped. Her weight shifted imperceptibly toward the door. James stopped at the bar, 15 feet away, close enough to speak normally, far enough to give her space. What's your name? He asked. She looked at Mike first, as if asking permission to answer. When Mike said nothing, she turned her face in James's general direction without actually meeting his eyes. Charlotte? Charlotte what? Carter. How old are you, Charlotte? 18. She said it, the same way she'd said it to Mike, fast, defensive, with the undertone of someone who'd had to prove it before, someone who'd been questioned, someone who'd been doubted. You got ID? Her hand went to her bag. The movement was careful, controlled, like she was afraid of making a mistake. She pulled out a battered wallet and extracted a driver's license, holding it out at arm's length so she wouldn't have to come closer. James took it. Pennsylvania license. Charlotte Louise Carter. Date of birth put her at 18 years and 4 months. The photo showed a girl with fuller cheeks and less damage behind her eyes. Taken 2 years ago, a lifetime ago, judging by the difference. He studied the license longer than necessary, using the time to study her instead. She'd tucked her left hand back into her pocket. Her right gripped the bag strap so tightly, her knuckles had gone white. She was looking at the floor near his feet, her breathing shallow and controlled. You live in the city, Charlotte? Yes, sir. Where? A pause. North Side. Philadelphia's North Side covered 20 square miles and half a dozen neighborhoods, ranging from gentrified to condemned. It was an answer designed to say nothing. You live alone? Her jaw tightened. With a friend? What friend? Just a friend. James handed back the license. She took it without looking up, shoving it back into her wallet with slightly trembling fingers. Mike, James said, not taking his eyes off Charlotte. Give us a minute. Mike hesitated. James felt rather than saw the question in his silence. The unspoken, are you sure? James didn't respond. After a moment, Mike's footsteps retreated toward the back office. The girl, Charlotte, had gone even more still. You hungry? James asked. That got her attention. Her eyes came up for half a second, confusion breaking through the careful blankness. What? When's the last time you ate? I'm fine. That's not what I asked. She looked away. This morning. Lie. He could see it in the way her hand moved unconsciously toward her stomach, in the way she swallowed like her mouth had gone dry. He'd bet money she hadn't eaten in at least 24 hours, probably longer. Gio, he called toward the kitchen. A moment later, a heavy-set man in his 60s appeared in the service window, wiping his hands on his apron. Make a plate, pasta, whatever you got ready. Dom, I just started the... Now, Gio. The chef disappeared without argument. Charlotte was shaking her head. I don't need... Sit down. It came out harder than he'd intended. She went very still, her eyes lowering immediately to the floor, In that same automatic submission, James felt something twist in his chest. Anger, though not at her. He softened his voice. "Please, sit." He gestured to one of the tables near the bar, not a booth, which might feel too enclosed. A two-top, with chairs instead of benches, positioned so she could see the exit at all times. Charlotte didn't move for a long moment. He could almost see her calculating the risks of staying versus running, the hunger versus the fear, the exhaustion versus the instinct that had kept her alive this long. Finally, she moved. Slow steps, her body angled so she was never fully turned away from the door. She pulled out a chair, but didn't sit. Instead, she lowered herself onto the edge, perched, like she might bolt any second. Her bag stayed across her body. Both hands stayed visible, resting on the table. James sat across from her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He let the silence stretch, watching her without staring. Up close, he could see more. The chapped skin on her lips, the raw patch on the side of her thumb where she'd been chewing her cuticles, the faint scar cutting through her left eyebrow, the yellowish remnant of a bruise just visible at her collarbone where her shirt gaped slightly, and the way she held herself, shoulders forward, arms close to her sides, taking up as little space as possible. "Why here?" he asked finally. "Sorry." "Why Vesper? Why my club?" She swallowed. "Oi. Someone said you might be hiring." "Who?" "I don't remember." Another lie. Worse than the others because she knew he knew it was a lie, but she said it anyway, which meant whoever had sent her here, or wherever she'd run from, was more dangerous than lying to a stranger. "You ever work in a nightclub before?" "No, sir." "You know what kind of club this is?" Her fingers tightened on the table edge. "Yes, sir." "You know who I am?" A longer pause. Then, "Yes, sir." Interesting. Most people who knew who James Sterling was didn't walk into his club asking for minimum wage cleaning jobs. They either avoided him entirely or came with specific requests, favors, deals, desperate proposals. This girl was doing neither. She was asking for scraps and hoping he wouldn't ask why. The kitchen door swung open. Gio emerged, carrying a plate loaded with rigatoni and red sauce, a piece of garlic bread, and a glass of ice water. He set it down in front of Charlotte without a word, his expression professionally neutral, though James saw the flicker of concern in his eyes as he looked at the girl. Charlotte stared at the food like it might vanish if she looked away. "Eat," James said. She didn't move. "It's not drugged. It's not a trap. You're hungry. Eat." Slowly, she picked up the fork. Her hands were shaking. She speared a single piece of rigatoni, brought it to her mouth, chewed carefully, swallowed, then seemed to realize how hungry she actually was. She ate quickly, but methodically, the way people ate when they'd been hungry for a long time, not frantically but with focused determination. Every few bites she paused to drink water, her eyes flicking up to check that he was still there, that nothing had changed. James waited. When she was halfway through the plate, he spoke again. "How'd you find out about this place?" She paused mid-bite, then finished chewing. "Someone mentioned it." "That someone have a name?" "I don't remember." "You don't remember much, do you?" Her jaw tightened. "I remember what matters." "And what matters, Charlotte?" She set down her fork. "Getting work so I can eat and have a place to sleep. That's what matters." "Fair enough." "You got a phone?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Number?" She rattled off 10 digits. James pulled out his phone and typed them in, then sent a single text. "Test." A moment later, a muffled buzz came from her bag. She pulled out a phone that looked like it had been dropped more than once. The screen cracked in 3 places. "Where are you staying?" he asked. "With a friend. I need an address." Her shoulders drew forward even more. "Why?" "Because if I hire you, I need to know where my employees live. Insurance purposes." Lie, but a believable one. She recited an address on Kensington Avenue. James knew the area, row houses, and addiction treatment centers. The kind of neighborhood where people minded their own business because everyone had something to hide. It was also the kind of address that could be real or completely fabricated. "This friend," he said. "They know you're here?" "No." "They're gonna worry when you don't come home tonight." "I'm not working tonight." "No," James agreed. "But if you're working for me, I need to know your situation. I need to know if someone's going to come looking for you. I need to know if you're going to show up for your shifts or if you're going to disappear." Something shifted in her expression. Fear, but sharper, more immediate. "I'll show up," she said quietly. "I need this job." "Why?" "Because I need money." "For what?" She looked away. "That's personal." He let the silence stretch again, watching her. She'd eaten most of the pasta, but had stopped now, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the table. The exhaustion was more visible now, the adrenaline wearing off enough to show how close to collapse she actually was. "You running from something, Charlotte?" Her head snapped up, her eyes meeting his for the first time, a flash of panic before she looked away again. "No, sir." "You running from someone?" "No, sir." Both lies. James leaned back in his chair, his posture deliberately casual. "Here's what I'm thinking. You show up here asking for work, you don't have references, you can't tell me who sent you, you're living at an address I'm betting is fake, and you're scared, not nervous, scared, the kind of scared that comes from experience." Charlotte said nothing. "Now, I'm going to ask you a question," he continued, his voice low, "and I need you to answer it honestly. Can you do that?" She didn't respond. "Are you safe?" Her throat worked. She kept her eyes on the table. "I'm fine. That's not what I asked. I don't need help." I didn't offer any. They sat in silence. James could see her struggling with something, whether to speak, whether to run, whether to trust even the smallest piece of the truth to a stranger, especially a stranger like him. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "If I tell you I'm not safe, what happens?" "Depends." "On what?" "On whether you want to change that." She looked up at him then, really looked at him, and he saw it. The calculation behind the fear. She wasn't helpless. She was surviving, and she was trying to figure out if he was another threat or a potential exit. Before she could answer, the service entrance opened. They both turned. A young man walked in, mid-20s, expensive haircut, designer jacket despite the heat. James recognized him immediately. Joey Thornton, son of Frank Thornton, one of James's suppliers. The kid handled liquor distribution for 3 of James's properties. Joey stopped when he saw them. His eyes went from James to Charlotte, lingering on her face for a moment. "Too long." "Dom," he said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Didn't know you had a meeting." "I don't." "Right. Yeah." Tony's gaze slid back to Charlotte. "You knew?" Charlotte had gone completely rigid, her face drained of color. Her right hand had moved to her bag again, gripping it like a lifeline. "She's interviewing," James said, his voice flat. "Cool, cool." Joey was still staring at her. "You look familiar. We met before." "No," Charlotte said, the word coming out strangled. "You sure? Because I swear I've seen you somewhere." She said no. James interjected, his tone brooking no argument. Joey finally looked away from Charlotte, holding up his hands. "My bad. Just thought, you know what? Doesn't matter. Dom, I need to talk to you about next week's shipment. You got a minute?" "Later." "It's kind of important." "Later." Something flickered across Tony's face, annoyance or maybe something harder, before he smoothed it away. "Sure. Yeah, I'll catch you later." He turned toward the office corridor, then paused. "Nice meeting you," he said to Charlotte. She didn't respond. When he was gone, Charlotte stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. "I should go." "Sit down." "I really need to." "Charlotte, sit." She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself back into the chair. But everything about her body language had changed. The careful control was cracking. Her breathing was faster. Her hands were shaking. "You know him," James said, not a question. "No." "Charlotte, I need to go. Look at me." She did, reluctantly. Do you know Joey Thornton? No. Has he ever hurt you? Her eyes widened. I don't know who that is. Then why do you look like you're about to pass out? She stood again, grabbing her bag. Thank you for the food. I'm sorry I wasted your time. She turned toward the door. James was faster. He didn't grab her. That would have been a mistake, but he moved to put himself between her and the exit. Move, she said, her voice cracking. Not until you tell me what just happened. Nothing happened. I need to leave. Charlotte. Move. The desperation in her voice stopped him. This wasn't fear anymore. This was full panic. He could see it in her eyes, in the way she was breathing, in the way she'd started to shake. Slowly, he stepped aside. She ran, not toward the service entrance where she'd come in, but toward the main entrance, the one that led to the street. Her footsteps echoed on the marble. She hit the door hard enough to make it bang against the exterior wall. And then she was gone. James stood in the empty club, his mind turning over what he'd just witnessed. Charlotte Carter was 18 years old. She was hungry, exhausted, and terrified. She had a fake address and rehearsed answers and bruises, hidden under long sleeves. And when Joey Thornton had walked into the room, she'd looked like she'd seen a ghost or a monster. James pulled out his phone and dialed. Yeah, Mike answered. Find out everything you can about Charlotte Louise Carter, 18, Pennsylvania driver's license. Says she lives on Kensington Avenue, but I'm betting she doesn't. Who is she? Someone in trouble. Dom, we got enough trouble. Just do it. He hung up and walked to the window, looking out at the street. Charlotte was long gone, but he could still see her in his mind's eye. The way she'd flinched, the way she'd held herself, the way she'd panicked when Joey appeared, the way she'd asked, if I tell you I'm not safe, what happens? James had spent 37 years in a world where violence was currency and fear was leverage. He'd seen every kind of damage a human being could inflict on another. He'd inflicted some of it himself when necessary, had sanctioned more, had looked away from enough, but there were lines he'd drawn decades ago and never crossed, and someone had crossed one of them on his territory. He pulled up Tony's number and sent a text. My office. 1 hour, then he went back to his booth and waited, thinking about a girl with old bruises and rehearsed lies, and wondering who had taught her to be that afraid. The first disappearance happened 3 days later. James was in his office going through the previous week's numbers when Mike knocked and entered without waiting for permission, something he only did when there was a problem. Carlos didn't show up for his shift, Mike said. James looked up from the spreadsheet. Carlos Mendoza was one of the evening bartenders. 26 years old, reliable, had been working at Vesper for 2 years. He call in? No. Text? Nothing. I tried his cell. Go straight to voicemail. James frowned. Carlos wasn't the type to no-show without warning. Send someone to his apartment. Already did. Landlord says he hasn't seen him since yesterday afternoon. That was unusual, but not unprecedented. People in their line of work sometimes had to disappear for a few days. Family emergencies, problems with the law, girlfriend drama, but they usually called. Give it 24 hours, James said. If he doesn't surface, file a missing person report. Mike hesitated. There's something else. What? Carlos was working Tuesday night, the night that girl came by, asking for work. James set down his pen. So he was at the bar when Joey came in. He might have heard you talking to her. And now he's missing. They looked at each other. James could see Mike working through the same calculation he was, whether this was coincidence or something worse. Check with the other bartenders, James said finally. See if Carlos mentioned anything unusual, any problems, anyone bothering him. You think this is connected to the girl? I think it's too early to think anything. Just find out what you can. Mike left. James sat at his desk, his mind turning over the information. Carlos's disappearance could be completely unrelated to Charlotte. People disappeared all the time in Philadelphia. Sometimes they came back. Sometimes they didn't. But the timing bothered him. He picked up his phone and called the number Charlotte had given him. It rang 4 times, then went to a generic voicemail. He didn't leave a message. He tried again an hour later. Same result. By evening, he'd called 6 times. No answer. The address she'd given him, the one on Kensington Avenue, turned out to be a vacant lot where a row house had burned down 3 years ago. No friend, no apartment, just rubble and weeds behind a chain-link fence. Charlotte Carter had lied about everything except her name. The question was why. 2 days after Carlos disappeared, the security guard vanished. James got the call at 3 a.m. He'd been asleep in his apartment above the club, a habit from his younger days, when living above the business meant you could respond to problems immediately. These days, it was mostly convenience. At his age, sleeping in a bed was sleeping in a bed. Dom. It was Mike, his voice tight. We got a problem. James sat up, instantly awake. What happened? It's Jimmy, the overnight security. He didn't check in at 2. You try calling him? Phone's off. I sent Paulo to check the perimeter. Dom, there's blood in the alley. James was pulling on his clothes before Mike finished speaking. Don't touch anything. I'll be down in 2 minutes. He took the private staircase from his apartment to the office, then went out through the service entrance into the alley behind Vesper. Mike was waiting with Paulo, one of the other security guards. Both men looked shaken. The alley was narrow, brick walls on both sides, dumpsters lined up near the back entrance. Security lights cast everything in harsh white, and there, near the side door, was a dark stain spreading across the concrete. James crouched next to it. Fresh, still wet, too much to be from a simple injury. Jimmy was checking the doors at midnight, Paulo said, his voice unsteady. I was up front. When I came around to rotate positions at 1, he was gone. I figured maybe he went inside to take a piss, but when he didn't show up for the 2 o'clock check-in, I called Mike. James stood, examining the alley. No body, no weapon, no signs of struggle except the blood. Jimmy was a big man, 6'3", 240 pounds, ex-military. He didn't go down easy. Check the cameras, James said. They went inside to the security office, a converted storage room lined with monitors showing feeds from 24 cameras positioned around and inside the club. Mike pulled up the footage from the alley camera, rewinding to midnight. They watched Jimmy make his rounds. He checked the door locks, scanned the alley, stood under one of the security lights, checking his phone. Normal routine. At 12:47 a.m., a figure appeared at the edge of the frame. Pause it, James said. Mike froze the image. The figure was partially obscured by shadows, but they could make out a man, average height, wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap pulled low. He approached Jimmy from behind. Keep going. The footage continued. Jimmy turned, clearly recognizing whoever it was. They spoke. Less than a minute of conversation. Then the figure stepped closer, his hand moving to his jacket. The next part happened fast. A flash of movement, Jimmy stumbling backward, falling, the figure crouching over him for less than 30 seconds, then standing, dragging Jimmy's body out of frame, leaving a trail of blood. Jesus, Paulo breathed. Run it back, James said. Slow this time. They watched it again and again. James focused on the figure's body language, his movements, the way he walked. There was something familiar about it, though he couldn't pin down what. You recognize him? Mike asked. Maybe. I'm not sure. Pull up the front cameras. I want to see if he came in that way. They scrolled through 2 hours of footage. At 11:23 p.m., the figure appeared on the front camera, approaching from the street. Same clothes, same cap. But for just a moment as he passed under a streetlight, his face was partially visible. Stop, James said. Mike froze the frame. The image was grainy. The angle wasn't great, but it was enough. James recognized him. Rico Santos, low-level enforcer who'd done work for several families in the city. 28 years old, came up through the streets of North Philly, had a reputation for being reliable but not particularly smart. James had used him a few times over the years for basic collection work. He also knew Rico had been running jobs for the Thorntons lately. That's Rico Santos, Paulo said, squinting at the screen. I've seen him around. You know who he works for? James asked. though he already knew the answer. Different people. I think he's been doing stuff for Frank Thornton lately. And the kid. Tony. James straightened. Get me everything we have on Rico. Known associates, recent jobs, where he lives, and I want to know every interaction Jimmy had in the last week. Everyone he talked to, everywhere he went. You think Rico killed him? I think Jimmy's dead and Rico put him in that alley. Whether he pulled the trigger or not, we're going to find out. Mike nodded. What about the cops? We gotta report this, right? James considered. In his world, involving the police was complicated. Most of the cops in his district were on someone's payroll, sometimes his competitors, sometimes their own. A murdered security guard would bring attention he didn't need, but Jimmy had been his employee, his responsibility. Give me 12 hours, he said. If we haven't found him by then, we make the call. Mike didn't argue. He knew how this worked. James went back upstairs to his apartment but didn't sleep. He sat in his office with the lights off, looking out the window at the street below, thinking about Carlos Mendoza disappearing without a word, about Rico Santos dragging Jimmy Reyes into the darkness, about Joey Thornton asking a terrified girl if they'd met before. And he thought about the way Charlotte Carter had looked at him when she'd asked, "If I tell you I'm not safe, what happens?" At 6 a.m., his phone buzzed. Text from Mike. Found something. You need to see this. James went downstairs. Mike was in the office with his laptop open, his expression grim. I went through Jimmy's phone records. In the last week, he made 17 calls to the same number. It's a burner, can't track it. But get this, he also called Carlos 3 times the day before Carlos disappeared. They friends? Not really. Co-workers, sure. But they didn't hang out, so why's Jimmy calling him multiple times? Keep going. I pulled the footage from last Tuesday, the day the girl came in. Watch this. Mike brought up the security feed. It showed the main floor of Vesper from the angle near the bar. There was Charlotte sitting at the table. James across from her. And there in the background, barely visible in the frame, was Carlos behind the bar. He was listening, Mike said. See how he's positioned? He's not working. He's standing still, watching you. So he heard our conversation. Some of it, at least. And look at this. Mike jumped forward in the footage. Now, Joey Thornton had entered the frame. Charlotte looked terrified. Joey was staring at her, and in the background, Carlos was staring at Tony. That means something to you? James asked. Not then, but look at this. Mike switched to footage from later that night after closing. The club was empty except for Carlos, cleaning glasses, and Joey, coming back in through the service entrance. They spoke briefly. Carlos looked nervous. "Joe, I left." That was the last time anyone saw Carlos, Mike said quietly. James watched the footage again, the body language, the timing, the pattern. Pull up everything we have on Joey Thornton, every interaction he's had with this club in the last year. Dom, he's Frank's kid. I know who he is. Frank Thornton had been doing business with James for 15 years. They weren't friends. In this business, you didn't really have friends, but they had a mutually beneficial relationship. Frank supplied liquor to 3 of James' properties. They made money together, they respected boundaries, but respect didn't mean trust. Pull the records. James repeated. Mike nodded and started typing. James went to his office and made a call. Yeah? The voice on the other end was rough, old, familiar. Frank, it's James. James, little early for a social call. Frank Moretti had been in the life longer than James had been alive. He was semi-retired now, but he still heard things. He still knew things. And he owed James a favor from a situation 5 years ago that had ended with Frank's grandson not going to prison. I need information, James said. What kind? The Thorntons, specifically Frank's son Tony. You heard anything about him lately? A pause. Why? Call it due diligence. Another pause. Longer this time. Then. Word is the kid's branching out, not sticking to the family business. What kind of branching? The kind that involves cargo you don't talk about. Young cargo, if you get my meaning. James's hand tightened on the phone. How sure? Sure enough that I told my guys to stay clear of anything he's involved in. I'm too old for that kind of heat. Frank, no. If he does, he's looking the other way. More likely the kid's operating under the radar. You don't exactly advertise that shit. I need names, associates, anyone working with him on this. Dom, I need names, Frank. A long silence, then, all right, give me a few hours. But James, if you're going after Frank's kid, you better be damn sure. That's not a hole you climb out of easy. I'm sure. He hung up. 3 hours later, Frank called back with a list of names. Most James didn't recognize. Low-level street guys, disposable muscle. But 2 names stood out, Rico Santos and Carlos Mendoza. Carlos was involved? James asked. That's what I'm hearing. Small role. Lookout, maybe some transportation work. Nothing heavy. But yeah, he was on the payroll. And now he's disappeared. Yeah, Frank said quietly. That's usually how it goes when people start asking questions. James thanked him and hung up. He sat in his office as the pieces fell into place. Joey Thornton was running a trafficking operation. Carlos had been involved, had seen Charlotte, had maybe recognized her, or realized James was asking questions. Joey had found out. Carlos had disappeared. Jimmy had made calls to Carlos, had maybe figured something out, had maybe tried to intervene or alert someone. Rico Santos, working for Tony, had made him disappear too. And Charlotte, had recognized Joey when he walked into Vesper, had panicked, had run, because she'd been one of Tony's victims. James stood and walked to the window. The morning sun was turning the street outside golden. People were starting their days, heading to work, walking dogs, grabbing coffee. Normal lives, safe lives. He thought about a girl with old bruises, asking for a job, cleaning bathrooms because she needed money and had nowhere else to go. He thought about what Frank had said, young cargo. And he thought about the line he'd drawn decades ago when he'd looked at what this life could make you become and had decided there were some things he wouldn't do, some money he wouldn't take, some deals he wouldn't make, some children he wouldn't hurt. His phone buzzed. Text from Mike. Joey just showed up asking to talk to you. James looked at his reflection in the window. A man older than his father had lived to be, carrying weight his father never had to carry, standing in an office, paid for by 30 years of compromises and calculations and controlled violence. He texted back, "Send him up." Then he unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk and pulled out the Glock he kept there. He checked the magazine, chambered around, and set it on the desk where Joey would see it when he walked in. Not a threat. A message. Joey Thornton walked into James's office like he owned it. That was the first mistake. The second was the smile. Easy, confident, the smile of someone who thought they were still in control of the situation. He wore an expensive suit, gray with thin blue pinstripes, the jacket unbuttoned. His hair was styled with too much product. He had his father's eyes, but none of his father's caution. He saw the gun on the desk and his smile faltered, just for a second. Then he recovered. "Dom," he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. "That's a hell of a greeting." James didn't stand. Close the door. Joey did, then moved to sit in one of the chairs, facing the desk. "Stay standing," James said. Joey stopped. The smile disappeared. "What's going on?" "Carlos Mendoza, where is he?" "How the fuck would I know?" "Because you were the last person to talk to him before he disappeared." "We had a conversation. So what? I talked to lots of people." "What did you talk about?" "Business, liquor orders. I don't remember." "Lie." Tony's jaw tightened. "Excuse me." "You're lying. Carlos didn't handle liquor orders. That's Mike's job, so..." "I'll ask you again, what did you talk about?" "I don't appreciate the tone, Dom. You're not my boss." "No, but this is my club and Carlos was my employee. So when you were the last person to talk to him and now he's gone, that's my business." They stared at each other. Joey was younger, stronger probably, but James had decades of experience reading men in rooms like this. He could see the calculation happening behind Tony's eyes, how much to admit, how much to deny, whether this was a problem or just an annoyance. "Carlos owed me money," Joey said finally. "Personal debt. I was collecting. How much? 5 grand. Carlos made 40,000 a year tending bar. Where'd he get 5 grand to owe you? I don't know, gambling maybe. Look, I didn't hurt the guy. I just told him he needed to pay up, that's it. And then he disappeared. Not my problem. It is if you had something to do with it. Tony's expression hardened. You really want to go there? You really want to accuse me of something? Because I can call my father right now and we can have a very different conversation about respect and territory and who the fuck you think you are. James leaned back in his chair, his hand resting near the Glock. Go ahead, call him. Joey pulled out his phone. While you're at it, James continued, you can explain to Frank what you've been doing without his knowledge. You can tell him about the side business you've been running, the one involving young girls in houses in Kensington and associates like Rico Santos who are willing to kill for you. Joey froze, his finger hovering over the screen. Yeah, James said quietly. I know. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, Joey slowly lowered the phone. You don't know shit. I know enough. You got proof of anything? I will. Then we don't have a problem. Joey straightened his jacket. You come at me with accusations, I'll bury you. You got that? I'll burn this whole fucking club down and piss on the ashes. Get out of my office. Joey stared at him, his face flushed with anger. Then he turned and walked to the door. He paused with his hand on the handle. That girl, he said without turning around. The one who came by asking for work. You might want to stop looking for her sake. Is that a threat? It's advice. Tony. He turned. If anything happens to her, James said, his voice flat and cold, I will kill you myself, and your father won't stop me because he'll know you brought it on yourself. You understand? Tony's smile came back, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're making a mistake, Dom. Probably. Get the fuck out. When the door closed, James sat in silence for a full minute. Then he picked up his phone and called Mike. Find Charlotte Carter, he said. Use every resource we have. Check hospitals, shelters, the streets. Find her. And if we do, bring her here, carefully. She's not going to want to come willingly, but bring her. We need to talk. He hung up and looked at the gun on his desk. In 37 years, he'd never pointed it at someone he wasn't prepared to kill. In 37 years, he'd killed 7 men. All of them had been necessary. All of them had been justified by the rules of the world he lived in. He wondered if an 8th would be necessary. He wondered if he cared. They found Charlotte 4 days later, in a condemned building 3 blocks from the club. Mike called at 2 a.m. We got her. Dom, she's in bad shape. How bad? Bad enough. Paulo's bringing her in now. She tried to run. He had to. We didn't hurt her, but she's scared out of her mind. Take her to my apartment. Not the office. The apartment. And Mike. No one else sees her. You, Paulo, me. That's it. Got it. James was waiting when they brought her up the private staircase. Paulo was carrying her. Not dragging, carrying like she'd collapsed or stopped fighting. She looked worse than she had a week ago. Thinner. Paler. There was a fresh bruise on her jaw and dried blood under her nose. Put her on the couch, James said. Paulo laid her down gently. Charlotte didn't resist. She was conscious, but not present. Her eyes unfocused, her breathing shallow. What happened? James asked. We found her in the basement of that old factory on Warner Street, Paulo said. She was hiding behind some machinery. When we called her name, she ran. Mike and I cornered her near the stairs and he hesitated. She what? She started screaming, not normal screaming like, I don't know, like she wasn't even seeing us. Mike grabbed her arm to keep her from falling down the stairs and she fought like a wild animal, scratching, biting, kicking. We tried to calm her down, but she just kept screaming until she passed out. Panic attack, severe dissociation. James had seen it before in soldiers coming back from war zones, in women who'd survived violence they couldn't articulate. Get her some water, he told Paulo, and then go. Tell Mike I want eyes on every entrance to this building. No one comes up here, no one. When Paulo left, James moved closer to the couch. Charlotte was starting to come back to herself, her eyes focusing slowly on her surroundings. She saw him and immediately tried to sit up. Easy, he said. She scrambled backward until she hit the arm of the couch, her hands up defensively. Don't touch me. I'm not going to touch you. Where am I? What did you... She stopped, looking around. They were in James's private apartment. Comfortable furniture, dim lighting, windows overlooking the street, not a basement, not a warehouse, not a prison. You're at Vesper, James said. Above the club, my apartment. You're safe. Safe. She laughed, a broken sound. Right. Charlotte, let me go. I can't do that. Then you're no different than them. The accusation hit harder than she probably intended. James moved to the chair across from the couch, sitting down slowly, keeping his hands visible. You're right, he said. I'm not letting you go. Not yet. Because if I do, you're going to go back to wherever you were hiding, and Tony's going to find you. And when he does, whatever happens next, that is going to be worse than anything you've already survived. Charlotte wrapped her arms around herself, shaking. How do you know about Tony? Because I know what he does. And I know you were involved in it. Her face crumpled. You don't know anything. Then tell me. Why? So you can sell me back to him? So you can make some deal? I'm not making any deals. Everyone makes deals. That's what you people do. You buy and sell and trade, and no one gives a shit who gets hurt. You're right, James said again. That's usually how it works. But not this time. Why? What makes me special? Nothing. You're not special. You're a girl who got hurt by people who were supposed to protect you, and now you're running because you don't have anywhere else to go. There are probably 100 girls like you in the city right now, maybe 1,000. But you're the one who walked into my club asking for work, which means you're the one I can help. Charlotte stared at him. Tears were running down her face, but her expression was hard. I don't want your help. Too bad. You can't keep me here. I can, and I will, until this is over. Over how? I'm going to stop Tony. I'm going to stop whatever operation he's running, and I'm going to make sure you're safe when it's done. She laughed again, that same broken sound. You think one person can stop this? You think Tony's working alone? There are so many of them, so many people involved, and they're all connected. You go after him, they'll come after you. They'll burn your club down. They'll kill everyone you care about, and then they'll still find me. Let me worry about that. Why? Her voice rose, desperate. Why do you even care? I'm nobody. I'm nothing. Just let me go and forget you ever saw me. I can't. Why not? Because he'd seen the bruises. Because she'd flinched at a raised voice. Because she'd asked him if she was safe, and he'd seen in her eyes that she didn't believe safety was possible anymore. Because 37 years ago he'd drawn a line and decided there were some things he wouldn't do, some people he wouldn't become, some children he wouldn't hurt. And if he let her walk back into the darkness now, that line would mean nothing. Because it's the right thing to do, he said. Charlotte looked at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. There is no right thing in this world. Maybe not. But there are wrong things, and what happened to you was one of them. She turned away, staring at the window. Outside, the city was dark except for streetlights and the occasional passing car. The normal world, continuing on while inside this room, they were having a conversation about horrors most people didn't want to believe existed. They took me 3 months ago, she said finally, her voice empty. I was walking home from my job at a gas station, night shift. It was late. There was a van, 2 men. They grabbed me and put something over my face, and when I woke up, I was in a room with no windows. James listened without interrupting. There were other girls, she continued, 5 of us in that first house. They told us we were going to work for them. They told us if we tried to run, they'd hurt our families. If we went to the cops, they'd kill us. They showed us pictures of girls who tried to leave, girls who were dead. Her voice didn't shake. It was like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed too many times. They moved us around, different houses, different cities sometimes. There were always men, different men. They paid money. We did what we were told. Some of the girls fought. Those girls disappeared. The rest of us learned. Did Tony? He wasn't one of the men who came to the houses. He was management. He checked on things, made sure everyone was following the rules. He was actually one of the nicer ones. Never hit us. Never forced himself on anyone. He just made sure we knew what would happen if we didn't cooperate. How did you get away? I didn't. Not really. She finally looked at him. 3 weeks ago there was a raid. I don't know if it was cops or rival gang or what, but someone came in shooting. The girls scattered, some got caught, some got away. I ran and I kept running. I've been hiding ever since. And you came to my club because I heard Tony's name connected to it. I heard he did business there. I thought maybe if I could get inside, I could find out more. Find out where they were keeping the other girls. Find out how to stop him. She laughed bitterly. Stupid, right? No, brave. It's the same thing. James stood and walked to the window, looking down at the street, his territory, his responsibility. The girls who were with you, he said. Do you know where they are now? Some of them. There's a house on Clearfield Street, another one on Somerset, maybe others. They moved them around to stay ahead of the cops. How many girls? I don't know, 20, 30. It changes. Who else is involved besides Tony? I don't know names, but there were always at least 3 or 4 men at each house. Guards, drivers. There was a woman too. She handled the money and the schedules. She was worse than the men. James turned back to her. Would you recognize her? Yes. Would you recognize the houses? Yes. Would you testify against them if it came to that? Charlotte's eyes widened. You want me to go to the police? Eventually, but not yet. Then what? I'm going to handle this my way first. Clean it up from the inside. Make sure every single person involved understands what happens when they cross this line. Then, when it's done, you can decide what you want to do next. Your way means people die. Yes. She studied him. You're really going to do this? Go after Tony? Go after all of them? Yes. Why? What do you get out of it? Nothing. Everyone gets something. Not this time. She shook her head slowly. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe. And me too, probably. No, I'll make sure you're protected. How? By keeping me locked in this apartment? Until it's safe for you to leave. Charlotte stood, swaying slightly. I don't want to be locked up anymore. I can't do that again. This isn't the same, isn't it? A man telling me I can't leave? For my own good? How is this different? James had no answer for that, because she was right. In the mechanics of it, this wasn't that different. He was taking away her choice, even if his intentions were better. I'll make you a deal, he said finally. You stay here for 48 hours. 72 at most. Just until I figure out how deep this goes and who's involved. During that time, you have access to everything in this apartment. Food, clothes, the TV, whatever you need. Paulo will be outside the door if you need anything, but he won't come in without your permission after 48 hours. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. You promise? I promise. She looked around the apartment again, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. Okay, 48 hours. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just make sure when this is over, those girls get out. I will. She was quiet for a moment, then, Mr. Sterling? Dom. Just Dom. Dom. Carlos and Jimmy, the men who disappeared. They're dead, aren't they? Probably. Because of me. No, because of what Tony's doing, and don't carry that weight, Charlotte. It doesn't belong to you. She nodded, but he could see in her eyes that she'd carry it anyway. That kind of guilt didn't listen to logic. There's a bedroom through there, he said, gesturing to a door. It's clean. There are clothes in the dresser that might fit. They were my sister's before she moved to Florida. Bathroom is attached. Take whatever you need. Where will you be? In my office downstairs. If you need anything, press 9 on the phone by the bed. It'll ring Paulo's cell. She nodded again. James moved toward the door, then paused. Charlotte, when this is over, when you're safe and you're ready to move on with your life, if you ever need anything, you call me. A job, a place to stay, money for school, whatever. You call me. I'll make sure you're taken care of. Why? Because someone should have done that 3 months ago, and since they didn't, I'm doing it now. He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him. In the hallway, Paulo was waiting. No one gets past you, James said. You understand? I don't care if it's Tony, his father, God himself. No one goes through that door. Got it. If she wants something, you get it for her, Mao. If she's scared, you call me immediately. If anyone comes asking questions, you don't know anything." Paolo nodded. He was a good soldier, loyal, competent. He'd proven himself in situations more complicated than this. James went downstairs to his office and closed the door. Then he sat at his desk and pulled out a legal pad, starting to make a list. At the top, he wrote, Clearfield Street, Somerset. Below that, Rico Santos. Woman, money, /schedules. And below that, in capital letters, Joey Thornton. He was going to dismantle this operation piece by piece. He was going to find every single person involved, and he was going to make sure they understood that there were consequences. Not legal consequences, those would come later if Charlotte decided to pursue them, but immediate, permanent, undeniable consequences, the kind James Sterling specialized in. He picked up his phone and started making calls. The house on Clearfield Street burned at 3 a.m. on a Thursday morning. No one died. James had made sure of that. His men had gone in first, 6 of them, armed but under strict orders not to shoot unless fired upon. They'd moved through the house systematically, room by room, pulling out 7 girls and 3 men. The girls ranged in age from 17 to 23. They were thin, exhausted, terrified. Some cried. Some didn't react at all, their eyes empty in a way that made James' chest hurt. The men fought. One of them pulled a knife and got a broken arm for his trouble. Another tried to run and made it half a block before Marcus tackled him. The third surrendered without resistance when he saw 5 guns pointed at his face. They zip-tied the men in the backyard while the house burned behind them. "Please," one of them kept saying. "Please, I didn't know. I was just hired to watch the place. I didn't know they were kids." "They're not kids," James said quietly. "They're prisoners, and you kept them locked up. I didn't hurt anyone. I swear to God, you watched them get hurt. You made sure they couldn't leave. That makes you responsible." He nodded to Vic, one of his most trusted men. Vic stepped forward and put a bullet in the man's knee. The scream was loud enough to wake the neighborhood, but this was Clearfield Street. People here knew better than to investigate gunshots at 3 a.m. "The other houses," James said. "Where are they?" "I don't know, I swear." Another shot, same knee, more screaming. Clearfield was just one location. James continued, his voice never rising. "We both know there are more. You've got about 30 seconds before I move to the other leg. Then your arms. Then places that are going to make the rest of your life very different." The man broke. He gave up 3 more addresses. Somerset, like Charlotte had said. Another on Allegheny. A third in a suburb 40 minutes outside the city. James committed them to memory, then turned to the other 2 men. They'd heard everything. They knew what happened to people who didn't cooperate. They gave up 7 more names. Associates, drivers, the woman Charlotte had mentioned. They gave up Joey Thornton without being asked. "He runs it all," one of them said, blood running from his nose where Marcus had hit him. "He gets the girls, he places them, he collects the money. His father don't know nothing about it. It's all Tony." "Who else?" "Rico Santos. He does the enforcement. Make sure no one talks. He's the one who killed your guys, Carlos and the security guard." James already knew that, but hearing it confirmed made something cold settle in his chest. "Where can I find Rico?" "He's got an apartment in Point Breeze. I don't know the exact address, but it's on Wharton Street, above the corner store." James looked at the 3 men. They were bleeding, terrified, pathetic. In a different world, maybe he'd feel sorry for them. In this world, he felt nothing. "You're going to make a choice," he said. "You can go to the hospital, get patched up, and disappear. Change your names, leave the state, start over somewhere far away. If I ever see your faces again, if I ever hear that you're involved in anything like this again, I will find you and I will kill you. That's option 1. He paused. "Option 2 is I put bullets in your heads right now and save everyone the trouble." "We'll leave," the man with the shattered knee gasped. "I swear, we'll leave tonight." The other 2 nodded frantically. "Good. Vic will drive you to the ER. You tell them you got mugged. You tell them nothing else. You understand?" They understood. James turned to the girls. They were huddled together near the fence, wrapped in blankets his men had brought. Most wouldn't look at him. One was crying silently. Another was staring at the burning house like she was watching her life go up in smoke. "You're safe now," he told them, crouching down so he was at eye level. "No one's going to hurt you. I have people who are going to take you somewhere safe. A shelter, not a hospital, not a police station unless you want that. They're going to give you food, clothes, a place to sleep. They're going to help you figure out what comes next." "Are you cops?" one of the girls asked, her voice hoarse. "No." "Then why are you doing this?" "Because someone needs to." He stood and gestured to Sophia, a woman who worked with a victims advocacy group he contributed to quietly. She'd agreed to take the girls, no questions asked, no reports filed unless the girls wanted them filed. "You're coming with me," Sophia told them gently. "Let's get you out of here." As they were loading the girls into vans, Mike pulled James aside. "Dom, that's a lot of noise. Fire department's going to be here any minute. So are the cops. Let them come. By the time they get here, we'll be gone, and all they'll find is a burnt building and 3 criminals who are going to tell them they got mugged." "What about the girls?" "They're with Sophia. She knows how to handle this." "And the other houses?" "We hit Somerset tomorrow night, same plan. Then Allegheny, then the suburb." "Dom, this is escalating. You're burning buildings, shooting people. I'm shutting down a trafficking ring that was operating on my territory without my knowledge. That's the message. Anyone involved, anyone who looked the other way, anyone who profited, they're done." Mike was quiet for a moment. "And Tony?" "Joey comes last. After we've dismantled everything he built. After he realizes he's got nothing left. His father, will understand when I explain it to him. And if he doesn't, that's a problem we'll deal with then." They drove away as sirens wailed in the distance. By Sunday night, all 4 houses were empty. 42 girls total. Ages ranging from 15 to 26. Some had been held for months, others for years. All of them with stories that James didn't ask about, but could see in their eyes. Sophia took them all. She had contacts at legitimate shelters, safe houses run by organizations that specialized in helping trafficking victims. She made sure every girl had options, resources, a path forward, if they wanted one. 14 men had been involved in the day-to-day operations. 3 were in the hospital with injuries that would take months to heal. 4 had run the moment they realized what was happening. 7 were dead. James hadn't wanted that. He'd wanted information, not corpses. But when you cornered men who'd spent months hurting vulnerable people, they sometimes made choices that ended badly for them. They reached for weapons. They threatened his men. They forced situations that had only one outcome. James didn't lose sleep over it. Rico Santos was the last one on the list. They found him at his apartment on Wharton Street, exactly where the man from Clearfield had said he'd be. It was 11 p.m. on Sunday. Rico was packing a bag when they kicked in the door. He went for the gun on his kitchen counter. Marcus shot him in the shoulder before he could reach it. Rico went down hard, screaming. "Everyone out," James said. His men left. Marcus hesitated, then followed. The door closed. James and Rico were alone. "You know who I am?" James asked. Rico was clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. He nodded. "Good. Then you know I don't make threats. I make promises. So, when I tell you that you have one chance to give me what I want, you need to understand I'm being literal. One chance. After that, you're done." "Fuck you," Rico gasped. James pulled out his phone and opened the photo Mike had sent him earlier. Surveillance footage of Rico dragging Jimmy Reyes's body into the alley behind Vesper. "You killed one of my men." He was asking questions. "About what?" "About the girls. About Tony's operation. He figured out something was going on." "So Joey told you to kill him." "Joey told me to handle it." "And Carlos Mendoza?" "Same thing. He saw that girl at your club. He recognized her from one of the houses. He was going to talk." "So you killed him too?" Rico's face was pale, sweat dripping down his temples. "It's business, man. Nothing personal." "It's very personal," James said quietly. "Carlos worked for me for 2 years. Jimmy had a wife and a daughter. You didn't just kill my employees. You killed people under my protection. And you did it because Joey Thornton told you to." I was just following orders. Not good enough. James pulled out his own gun, the Glock from his office, and set it on the counter next to Rico's weapon. I'm going to ask you questions, he said. You're going to answer them completely and honestly. If you do that, you live. I'll drop you at a hospital, you'll get patched up, and you'll spend the next 20 years in prison for murder. If you don't answer, or if you lie, I'm going to shoot you and leave you here for your neighbors to find in a few days when the smell gets bad. I want a lawyer. I'm not a cop, you don't get a lawyer. Rico stared at him. James could see him working through it. The odds of survival, the chances of escape, the reality that he was bleeding out on his kitchen floor and his only option was to cooperate. What do you want to know? He said finally. Everything. Start with how Tony's operation works. Rico talked for 20 minutes. He laid out the structure. How girls were recruited or kidnapped, how they were moved between locations, how clients were vetted and charged. He named names, gave addresses, described the financial setup. The woman Charlotte had mentioned was Elena Vasquez. She handled money and logistics. She was smart, ruthless, and had been doing this for 5 years before Joe even got involved. Joey had started the operation 18 months ago. His father didn't know. Frank thought his son was just managing the liquor distribution business and doing side work as an enforcer. The trafficking was completely under the radar, run through shell companies and cash transactions that never touched the family's legitimate operations. How much money are we talking about? James asked. $500,000 a year, maybe more. I don't know the exact numbers. Elena would know. Where is Elena now? I don't know. She disappeared after the Clearfield house burned. Probably figured out what was happening and ran. How do I find her? I don't know, man. She's careful. She's got fake IDs, offshore accounts, connections in other cities. She could be anywhere. James considered this. Elena Vasquez was a problem. As long as she was out there, she could rebuild the operation, start over somewhere else. But that was a problem for later. Right now, he needed to focus on Tony. Where does Joey keep his records? Financial documents, client lists, everything. There's a storage unit, industrial park off I-95, unit 217. He's got it all there. Paperwork, hard drives, backups of everything. Does he know you're telling me this? No. Good. Call him. Rico blinked. What? Call Tony. Tell him you need to meet tonight. Tell him it's urgent. He'll know something's wrong. Make him believe you. You're good at following orders, right? This is an order. Call him and set up a meeting. If you do it right, you get to live. If you fuck this up, I shoot you and go after Joey myself. Rico's hand shook as he pulled out his phone. He dialed, waited, then started talking when Joey answered. It's me. We got a problem. James Sterling knows. I don't know how, but he knows everything. We need to meet. No, not on the phone. In person. The warehouse on Columbus. Midnight. Yeah, I'm sure. Just get there. He hung up. Good, James said. Now we wait. The warehouse was empty except for ghosts and shipping containers. It sat at the edge of the port district, one of dozens of abandoned industrial buildings that had been bought and sold half a dozen times or by developers who never quite got around to developing. Chain link fence, broken windows, graffiti on every surface. It was the perfect place for a meeting no one wanted recorded. James arrived at 11:45 p.m. with 4 of his men, Marcus, Vic, Paulo, and Sal. They'd been with him for years. They knew how this worked. They'd spread out through the building, positioning themselves in the shadows where they could see without being unseen. Rico was zip-tied to a support pillar near the entrance, his shoulder bandaged, but still bleeding through. He looked like he might pass out any second. That was fine. He'd served his purpose. James stood in the center of the warehouse floor, under one of the few working lights. His gun was holstered. His hands were empty. He wanted Joey to see him, to think he was alone, to believe he had the advantage. At 11:58, headlights swept across the entrance. Tony's car, an Audi, expensive, black, pulled up outside. The engine cut off. A door opened and closed. Footsteps on concrete. Joey walked into the warehouse alone. He saw Rico first, then James. He stopped. Dom, he said, his voice carefully neutral. Hell of a place for a meeting. Rico said you'd come. Rico says a lot of things. Joey looked at his associate, taking in the zip ties, the blood, the obvious damage. You okay, man? Rico didn't answer. Joey turned back to James. So what is this? An ambush? You planning to shoot me? If I wanted to shoot you, you'd already be dead. Then what? I'm giving you a chance to explain. Explain what? The houses, the girls, the operation you've been running for the last 18 months. Tony's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You got bad information, Dom. Someone's feeding you lies. I've got 7 girls who say otherwise. I've got addresses, I've got names, I've got your storage unit off I-95 with records of every transaction you've made. And I've got Rico here who told me everything. Joey looked at Rico again. That true? Rico met his eyes. I'm sorry, Tony. He was going to kill me. Yeah. Tony's voice was flat. I bet he was. He reached into his jacket. James's men were faster. The sound of 4 hammers being cocked echoed through the warehouse. Red laser dots appeared on Tony's chest. 2 from Marcus and Vic in the rafters. 2 from Paulo and Sal behind shipping containers on either side. Joey froze, his hand still inside his jacket. Slowly, James said. Joey pulled out his gun, a 9mm chrome finish, and tossed it onto the concrete between them. It clattered across the floor and came to rest 10 feet away. You want to hear my explanation? Joey asked, his hands held out to his sides. Fine, here it is. I saw an opportunity. I had access to resources, connections, muscle. There's demand for what I was providing, lots of demand. Rich men, powerful men, men who pay well and keep their mouths shut. I wasn't hurting anyone who mattered. You were hurting children. I was doing business, and I would have kept doing business if you hadn't stuck your nose in where it didn't belong. It's my territory. Everything that happens here belongs to me. Your territory. Joey laughed, the sound harsh. You think you own this city? You think you got some moral high ground? You're a criminal, Dom, same as me, same as everyone in this life. You've killed people. You've broken people. You've done things that would make normal people sick. So don't stand there acting like you're better than me. I'm not better than you, James said quietly. But I have limits, lines I don't cross, and you crossed one. Because of some girls, some nobodies who were never going to amount to anything anyway. Because they were people, and you treated them like property. Joey shook his head. You're weak, Dom. You're getting soft in your old age. That's what this is. 10 years ago, you would have seen the profit in what I was doing and asked for your cut. But now you're playing hero because of what? Because one girl walked into your club with sad eyes and bruises. Charlotte Carter, that's her name. And she's the reason you're about to lose everything. Charlotte? Joey smiled. Yeah, I remember her. Pretty thing. Fought hard at first. She was at the Somerset house for a while, made good money off her. She escaped during the raid? James's jaw tightened. I'll find her again, Joey continued. After this is done, after I clean up this mess you're making, I'll find her and I'll make sure she knows what happens when you run. I'll make sure all the girls know. You're not finding anyone, James said, because after tonight you're done. You going to kill me, Dom? Right here, because I'm betting you won't. You'll rough me up, sure. Maybe break a few bones, but kill Frank Thornton's son? That's a war you can't win. My father has more men, more money, more connections than you could ever. Your father's going to let me do whatever I want to you, James interrupted. Because when I explain what you've been doing, when I show him the evidence, when I tell him that you were operating a trafficking ring without his knowledge and bringing heat to his entire organization, he's going to thank me for cleaning up your mess. And if he doesn't, if he tries to protect you anyway, then yes, I'll go to war with Frank Thornton, and I'll win. Joey stared at him. Some of the confidence had drained from his face. Here's what's going to happen, James continued. You're going to give me access to that storage unit, every file, every hard drive, every piece of evidence about your operation. Then you're going to sit down with a pen and paper, and you're going to write down every name of every person who was involved, associates, clients, all of them. I'm not doing that. Yes, you are. Because if you don't, I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to give you to Charlotte and the other 41 girls you trafficked. I'm going to let them decide what happens to you, and I'm going to film it and send it to every family in this city so they know what happens to men who hurt children. Tony's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. Am I? They stared at each other. The warehouse was silent except for the distant sound of traffic on the highway. Finally, Joey spoke, his voice strained. If I give you what you want, what happens to me? You go to prison. I've got a cop on my payroll who's been wanting to make a name for himself. I'll hand him everything. Evidence, testimony, locations. He'll build a case. You'll get arrested. You'll go to trial. You'll be convicted. You'll spend the next 20 years in a cell. 20 years. At least. Probably more. With your connections, you might get protective custody. You might not. Either way, you'll be alive. What about my father? That's between you and him. Joey was quiet for a long time. James could see him processing, calculating, trying to find an angle that would let him escape. But there wasn't one. He'd built his operation in the shadows, thinking no one would notice, thinking he was too smart to get caught. He'd been wrong. Okay, Joey said finally. Okay, I'll give you everything. Just let me walk out of here. Marcus? James called. Marcus appeared from the beam rafters, climbing down a ladder with his rifle slung across his back. He pulled out a notepad and pen and handed them to Tony. Start writing, James said. Joey took the pen with shaking hands. He leaned against a shipping container and started writing names. It took 20 minutes. When he was done, he handed the notebook to James. James scanned the list. 47 names. Some he recognized. Most he didn't. But each one represented someone who'd participated in or profited from Tony's operation. The storage unit, James said. Key. Joey pulled a key from his pocket and tossed it over. James caught it. Can I go now? No. Tony's eyes widened. You said. I said you'd go to prison. I didn't say when. James pulled out his phone and made a call. It rang twice. Yeah? Detective Dan O'Brien answered. He was one of the few cops in the city James trusted. Not because Brennan was on his payroll, but because Brennan actually gave a shit about doing the right thing. Mike, it's James. I've got something for you. It's midnight, Dom. I know what time it is. I've got a human trafficking case, multiple locations, 42 victims, extensive documentation, and I've got the man responsible standing in front of me right now. A pause. You serious? Completely. How fast can you get to the warehouse on Columbus Boulevard, the abandoned one near the port? 20 minutes. Make it 15. And Mike, bring backup. This is going to be big. He hung up. Joey had gone completely white. You're turning me in? Now? Right now. My father. We'll find out when the morning news breaks, along with everyone else in this city. Dom, please, we can work something out. Money, territory, whatever you want. I don't want anything from you. There are people on that list who are powerful. Judges, politicians, businessmen. They'll come after you for this. Let them try. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Joey looked toward the entrance, then back at James. For a moment, James thought he might try to run, but there was nowhere to go. Marcus and the others had moved to block all the exits. I'll tell them you're involved, Joey said desperately. I'll tell them you knew. I'll tell them you were part of it. Go ahead. I'll survive. You won't. The sirens were louder now. Red and blue lights swept across the warehouse walls. Joey slumped against the shipping container, defeated. You're going to regret this. I doubt it. Detective Brennan arrived with 6 patrol cars and a SWAT van. He walked into the warehouse with his service weapon drawn, taking in the scene. Joey Thornton unarmed and surrounded, Rico bleeding and zip-tied, James standing calm in the center of it all. Dom, Brennan said carefully. What's going on here? That man, James pointed at Tony, has been running a human trafficking operation for the last 18 months. I have documentation, witness testimony, and a list of everyone involved. It's all yours. Brennan looked at Tony, then back at James. And you? I was never here. Dom, take the win, Mike. This case will make your career. You'll rescue 42 girls, bring down a major trafficking ring, and arrest the son of one of the most powerful men in the city. All you have to do is forget you saw me tonight. Brennan was quiet for a moment, then he holstered his weapon and gestured to his officers. Cuff him. 2 cops moved forward and grabbed Tony. He didn't resist. As they led him toward the patrol cars, he looked back at James one last time. You're a dead man, he said. Maybe, James replied, but I'll die knowing I did the right thing. When they were gone, James stood alone in the empty warehouse. His men had already left through the back exit. The place was silent again. He pulled out his phone and called Mike. It's done, he said. All of it? All of it. Tony's in custody. The cops have everything they need. It'll be on the news by morning. What about Frank? I'll talk to him tomorrow, but tonight, I need you to do something for me. What? Go to my apartment, tell Charlotte it's over, tell her she's safe, and tell her she can leave whenever she's ready. You're not going to tell her yourself. No, I need to take care of something else first. He hung up and walked out of the warehouse into the cool night air. His car was parked a block away. He got in, started the engine, and drove toward the river. He'd been carrying the weight of this for a week, the knowledge of what Joey had done, the responsibility to stop it, the choices he'd had to make. Men had died, buildings had burned, a criminal empire had been dismantled. But 42 girls were free. That had to count for something. He parked at a lookout spot overlooking the Delaware River and sat there as dawn slowly broke over the city. The water turned from black to gray to gold. Boats moved in the distance. Birds called from the trees. It was beautiful, and somewhere in that city, Charlotte Carter was waking up in a place where she was safe. That counted for more than something. It counted for everything. 3 months later, James was in his office reviewing applications for a new security position when Mike knocked. "Someone here to see you," he said. "Who?" "She says her name is Charlotte." James looked up. "Let her in." Charlotte Carter walked into his office, and it took him a moment to recognize her. She'd gained weight, not much, but enough that her face had filled out, enough that she didn't look like she was about to collapse. Her hair was shorter, styled differently. She wore jeans and a sweater, casual but clean. New clothes, he noted, not borrowed, not secondhand, but it was her eyes that were different, still guarded, still careful, but not empty. There was life there again. "Hi," she said. "Hi, it's good to see you. Is it okay that I came?" "Of course. Sit." She sat in one of the chairs facing his desk, her posture more relaxed than it had been the last time she was here. She'd set down her bag, a new one, leather, nice, and folded her hands in her lap. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what you did, for stopping them. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Because of you, I'm alive. Because of you, I'm free. So thank you." James nodded. "What have you been doing?" "I've been staying at a shelter. Sophia, the woman you sent us to. She's been helping me figure things out. I've got a part-time job now. Nothing special, just retail. But it's mine. I'm earning my own money, paying my own way. That's good. I'm also taking classes. GED prep. I never finished high school, but I'm going to, and then maybe college. Sophia thinks I could get scholarships." "You could do anything you want, Charlotte." She smiled. A small, tentative thing, but real. "I'm starting to believe that." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "The trial's coming up," Charlotte said finally. "Tony's trial. The prosecutors want me to testify. Are you going to?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me wants to stand up there and make him look at me and know that he didn't break me. But part of me just wants to move on, forget it ever happened." "You can't forget." "I know, but I can choose not to let it define me." "That's brave." "You keep saying that. Brave. But I don't feel brave. I feel lucky. Lucky that I ran into you instead of someone else. Lucky that you cared enough to do something. Luck had nothing to do with it. You survived because you were strong. You got out because you fought for it." She looked away, her eyes shining. "The other girls, the ones from the houses, do you know what happened to them?" "Most are in shelters or reunited with families. A few have disappeared. I don't know where they went, but they're not in those houses anymore. That's what matters. There's one girl. Her name was Lily. She was at the Somerset house with me. She's 15. She doesn't have any family. Sophia's trying to get her into a good foster home, but it's complicated." "What does Lily need?" "A chance. Someone who gives a shit about her." James pulled out his phone and sent a text. "Give me Sophia's number. I'll make some calls." Charlotte rattled off the number. "You'd do that? For someone you've never met?" "I did it for 42 someones I'd never met. What's one more?" She shook her head, something like wonder in her expression. "I still don't understand you. Why you did this, what you got out of it." "I got to sleep at night knowing I did the right thing." "That's really all?" "That's everything." Charlotte stood. "I should go. I just wanted you to know that I'm okay, that what you did mattered." "Charlotte," she paused, "my offer still stands. If you ever need anything, A job, money, help with school, whatever. You call me. You've got my number. Use it. I will. But Dom? Yeah. I don't want to need anyone to save me anymore. I want to save myself. Good. That's exactly what you should want. She smiled again, and this time it reached her eyes. Goodbye, Dom. Goodbye, Charlotte. He watched her walk out of his office, her stride confident, her head held high. She wasn't running, she wasn't hiding, she was just walking out the front door of a nightclub, in the middle of the afternoon, like she had every right to be there. Because she did. The door closed behind her. James turned to the window and looked out at the street. The sun was setting, painting the buildings orange and gold. People were heading home from work. Couples were walking hand in hand. Kids were playing soccer in the park across the street. Normal life. Safe life. He thought about Joey Thornton sitting in a cell waiting for trial. He thought about Frank Thornton, who'd accepted the situation with surprising grace once James had explained what his son had been doing. He thought about the 47 names on that list, most of whom had been arrested or had fled the city. He thought about Carlos Mendoza and Jimmy Reyes, who hadn't survived to see justice done, but whose deaths had set this entire thing in motion. And he thought about a girl who'd walked into his club, asking for work, who'd recognized danger when she saw it but had been too desperate to run, who'd looked at him with exhausted eyes and asked if she was safe. She was safe now. They all were. James had spent 37 years in a world where violence was currency and power was everything. He'd made choices that kept him awake at night. He'd crossed lines that couldn't be uncrossed. He'd become the kind of man his mother would have wept to see. But he'd also drawn other lines, lines that said there were some things he wouldn't do, some people he wouldn't become, some children he wouldn't hurt. And when someone had crossed those lines on his territory, he'd done what needed to be done, not because it was profitable, not because it was smart, because it was right. He picked up his phone and texted Charlotte. Good luck with everything. You're going to be fine. 3 dots appeared. Then, I know, thank you. James set down his phone and went back to the applications on his desk. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But for the first time in a long time, he felt something close to peace. The sun set over Philadelphia, and James Sterling, criminal, killer, protector, watched the light fade and felt okay about the man looking back at him in the window's reflection. It wasn't redemption.